at the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. this week. And among other things, they witnessed a 45-minute video compilation with footage and photos documenting the brutality of the Hamas terrorist invasion of Israel. And, it included, the video included terrorists attacking civilians in their homes, shooting them at the music festival. These videos and images have been withheld from the public simply because of the brutal nature, but also certainly out of respect for the victims' families. But it represents a chilling document of what hate, and in this case, anti-Semitism, what it can do to drive people to do evil things. Well, joining me now to discuss this is FRC's director of the Center for Biblical Worldview, David Closson. He attended the event at the Israeli embassy this week. David, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to have you.
It's good to be with you, Jody. Thank you.
All right, well, without getting too graphic, how chilling was the video that you saw this week?
Honestly, Jody, it was very difficult to sit through that. Most of the footage that was included in this 45-minute film was actually taken from the body cameras of Hamas terrorists. Other footage came from home security systems of Israeli families. And Jody, again, it was very difficult. There was a couple of times I did need to look away, but it was senseless. It was callous. It was depraved. Watching children having to watch their parents get shot in front of them. Again, some of this I don't even feel comfortable speaking about, seeing how depraved it was. But for a biblical worldview that tells me that there's original sin that exists and that we live in a fallen world, it was hard to make sense of the sheer evil and wickedness that was depicted in that, Jody. Grateful that I had an opportunity to look at it, and and one final thing I'll mention though is it's interesting that these fighters were wearing a vest and wanting to record this, and that was the other thing that was so horrifying to me, is that often these terrorists would turn the cameras on themselves, saying things like Allah Akbar and celebrating the fact that they were murdering Jews. And so again, it was horrifying, and it showed the juxtaposition of true evil next to just innocent people trying to live their lives.
Unbelievable. I have not seen what you are talking about, but I have seen similar images in the past, and I can just tell you, it shook me for days to get over it. And look, we don't want to wallow in the darkness, but I do think there is importance to shine the light on the inhumanity, the depravity, the brutality that took place. That kind of shocking reality tends to awaken people to get involved, to pray, to do whatever they can to help. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I agree with that, Jody, 100%. And my wife and I, since I came home a couple of days ago from that showing at the embassy, have spent extended amounts of time praying for the hostages, praying for the families that are just trying to put the pieces back together. And so you're absolutely right. I think the world does need to know, because unfortunately, it's only been 5 or 6 weeks since the horrifying events happened, and so many people are wanting to turn the page to move on. But we shouldn't move on. We need to be supporting our friends in Israel because they're facing an existential threat. They're facing an enemy that wants to wipe them off the face of the earth. And if we don't understand what motivates these terrorists, what motivates Hamas, we're not going to understand the unfolding war that's taking place right now.
It's so well said. One thing that bothers me, David, is so many on the left seem to literally rally to excuse or defend the actions of Hamas here. And especially now that you've witnessed just how horrific some of the violence has been, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think, from Haman to Hitler, anti-Semitism is one of the longest running scourges on the face of this earth. and seeing these rallies that have cropped up in Europe and the United States that are celebrating what Hamas is doing. Jew hatred is the only thing I can think of. I think there's a spiritual component to this. It's not just opposition to the current Israeli government. There's a deep-bedded anti-Semitism that's been living amongst us, and that I think some on the left are actually shocked themselves to find exploding on college campuses. But one other thing that I think that contributes to this is this intersectionality, this critical theory that sees the world through the lens of oppressor and oppressed. And when you see the world, Jody, through the lens of oppressor and oppressed, well, guess what? The ends justify the means. And so this justifying of Hamas, this justifying of this terrorist activity, well, from their perspective, if Israel is inherently an oppressor, then Hamas can do whatever they'd like. And they're not morally blameworthy because this settler colonialism is what they're fighting against. And so, of course, that's historically naive, that's historically inaccurate. But when this intersectionality critical theory becomes the lens through which you see the world, why it's such a sinister worldview is you can begin to dismiss and explain away almost anything. And so I think this is why worldview matters.
It really does. You know, there's no question the anti-Semitism is driving so many, hatred for Jews, just driving so many people to evil in this. But others just have a lack of knowledge. And I think we saw a lot of this. Probably many of our viewers and listeners right now are hearing. They've looked at this Osama bin Laden letter to America. How does something like this fit into our discussion?
Well, Jody, I often say when I'm talking to pastors that, we live in a biblically illiterate age. People just don't know actually kind of the basic building blocks of the Scripture. They don't know the basic meta-narrative of the Bible. It's also true that we live in a historically illiterate age. Gen Z now, the generation born between 1998 and 2004, the youngest generation of adults and college students, they did not live through 9/11. They don't remember what that was like. And so I think the historical illiteracy, and we shouldn't be surprised when our schools are doubling down on teaching queer theory and feminist theory and LGBT issues and ideologies. Well, guess what they're not teaching? They're not teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, or basic American history. And so I think the historical illiteracy that we've been talking about for a while when we have discussions about education, the chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak, when you have a whole generation that doesn't understand basic issues related to our own history, including what led to 9/11.
Well, David Closson, I can't thank you enough for your incredible leadership in helping with resources and articles and just a host of ways, helping spread a biblical worldview. And these days, Christians need to have answers, and they need to engage this. Where can people go to find some more resources in just a brief few seconds that we have?
Yeah, absolutely. frc.org/worldview is where all of our resources related to this issue and others can be found. frc.org/worldview.
Well, that wraps up this evening edition and this week of Washington Watch.